Hello everyone. I like to get started in preparing for the clay model. So you need a couple things, a modeling board. I had some scrap plywood that I could use, my sketches that I've had, a screwdriver and some screws. So with the soap, you got to think of how big it is, right? And I cut these out from my sketches, and I'm thinking about a soap bar, so this would be a pretty big soap bar. You could decrease or increase that in your percentages of if you scan your original sketch in your printer if you want to. So that's something you could play with. So I cut that out and I traced it on my modeling board there. You can see the line. And I also have two screw holes here. The screws are just to help with anchoring the clay down so that it doesn't move around. And I pre-drilled some holes in there, and that makes it easy to do it. I also got some picture hanging wire if you want to, and this kind of helps it all kind of hold down so it doesn't move around. And you could use some of that. It's not necessary, but it just kind of helps. So there, that. And then I also have my clay that I've asked you to get. And so I'm about to do that, so I'll go ahead and do that. So, thanks. So I took my wrapper off my clay, and I started to wrap it around my piece here, and I'm pushing it up against the screws and the wire that will help anchor it down. We will be painting on some molding material onto this, so we didn't want to move around, and that's why these screws are here. Again, you don't necessarily have to have the wire. It's just an added thing to help it stay there. Now you kind of have to, depending on if you got medium or hard. I got the hard clay, and you kind of have to work it in your hands to kind of soften it up a little bit to get it a little bit more malleable. One could even kind of like work it with the end of their screwdriver, or I've also had used a popsicle stick that I had. For a modeling tool, I just sharpened it with some sandpaper, and that works out pretty good if I wanted to press or start modeling clay. But for right now, I'm going to take this clay, and now I'm going to kind of push it and to wrap it around that screw really well to kind of help anchor it kind of down to the modeling board. And that's what I'm doing right now. You can kind of work it down and push it down with your end of your screwdriver there. That works out fine. What's great about this clay is that it's sulfur free, of course, works with our molding material. That's really important. One is that we can reuse it later if we want to, because it doesn't harden. So you can get a lot of life out of this clay. Hey everyone. I wanted to give you some more pointers about clay modeling and casting that we need to talk about. My stage right now is that I've got the majority of the generalized form down. The exterior contour was kind of like my sketch, or how I traced it out. I'm starting to develop different heights, so that can kind of differentiate between the two forms that I've kind of roughed out here. And one thing that I want to talk about, since this is a relief, meaning that it has a flat back and it's not like totally in the round. Like, for example, this would be a sculpture, right? That it's more upright and stands up and in the round. This is meant to be more of a relief work here. So is about kind of like understanding undercuts, meaning that kind of like an ice cube tray. For those who have done that, you fill up the water in the ice cube, you freeze it, and then when it comes out, you kind of twist it a little bit, and the ice cubes kind of pop out. How that happens is kind of like almost if you would freeze water in a bowl, and then since the bowl has a pitch to it, it can come out, or that ice could come out. That's really important as far as our mold making things go, is because we need the soap to come out after we made a mold or an ice cube tray. So that's really kind of important for us to understand. So to do that is we kind of need it to pitch, kind of like what a bowl does, right? In this event, it's more of like a pitch inward, if you think about it that way, so that it just has a slight kind of taper to it that it could release off of both the molding material and the soap base later on. Some more things I would like to talk about is this is a really big one, and maybe I'm doing that because it I can demonstrate it a little bit better. Here is just a normal soap bar. You can tell on how the difference of size that is. So this is a really extremely big one. I used all one single piece of the molding material, or excuse me, the clay package, just one package. So you do not want to go over that. I recommend maybe using just half of one for this. I got a question the other day, is that could I do two different pieces? You could, but still do not exceed the one package of clay. I think that's a really important part of this, because if we did exceed it, we wouldn't have enough molding material, and also too is that we wouldn't have enough soap base to use. So do not exceed one clay package. That's really important. So if we think about in the next stage here is we're going to work with intermediate modeling. So to get more specific with things, we work past generalized form to get a little bit more focus in it, and then finally some detail. And this basically all I'm doing it is with my popsicle stick here, or the end of a pencil, whatever it may be. So detail modeling. It's one of the finishing touches to any clay model. And what's great about it is that you can utilize many different techniques. You don't need any fancy tools per se. Maybe it might be something that you have around the studio. I wanted to show you a couple different ones that I've made. One is this modeling stick that I've used, this popsicle stick. And essentially is that I kind of just drag it over the top of the surface over and over again to create a kind of a texture there. The next one would be, I found this stripper for an angle grinder, and I'm just kind of depressing on the clay this way and that way and creating this kind of crumbly kind of texture. Another one would be, the end of a paintbrush or so, and noticing I'm always like do repetition, or you can do repetition drag. Those types of things really work. Paper clip, kind of just putting it on there kind of gives a nice kind of pattern. So you can use whatever you have around the studio to obtain whatever it might be to investigate nature a little bit more. I always like distinguish between general, intermediate, and detail. I think that it offers some visual organization within the work. Whether it might be a focal point or an area you want to draw more attention to, and detail often does that. And also there is a uniqueness about it as far as viewing it from far away versus up close. And that kind of variance kind of draws in the viewer often, and it's a nice added feature to a lot of sculpture. So just kind of wanted to do a brief review. One is we're working with general form as first. I remember having the cutout of the sketch, drawing it out on the board, kind of roughly putting our clay onto the board and with screws. Intermediate form of changing depths, right? Having variance of depths. And then finally detail of getting in some texture going to offer a little bit more variation. I've yet to kind of do the next demo, which is the blanket mold, and I'll talk about a clay dam in a moment.